Good evening, garden of band banners. Today here on This Nuts, we have something a little special. Submitted by a fan named Jackie Zimmerman, we have a story that we think you'll like. It gets a little creepy, and it'll pull on your heartstrings, and it's a wild ride. So get a snack and a drink, and let's get into it. The breeze rustled the cornstalks gently, the air holding a touch of crisp, cold autumn. The metal of the tractor beneath them was chilled to the touch, with a thin film of condensation touching their legs. The deep violet sky grew lighter and paler as it approached the horizon before them, the stars beginning to melt into the morning light. The shorter one of the two perked up and began excitedly kicking her legs.
Ooh, look, Lapis! It's about to happen!
Peridot exclaimed, eagerly pointing to the horizon. Lapis and Peridot watched the crest of the sun peak above the horizon, engulfing the two gems and their surroundings in a golden light. Lapis's distant, detached expression melted, her eyes widening with wonder as she took in the beautiful sight before her. The rising sun was set as the centerpiece to the radius of the brightening sky, the landscape bathed in gold as it approached the horizon. Lapis looked to her friend, Peridot's eyes wide as she marveled at the spectacle. Lapis felt the same sense of amazement that consumed her friend. She began to feel warm as a surge of adoration flowed over her. She appreciated Peridot for sharing this with her, and for making this moment possible. She had never before felt this close to her friend, sharing the same emotions in the same moment. For the moment, their hearts were one.
Wow.
Was all Lapis got out as she took it all in.
Isn't it beautiful?
Peridot asked, basking in the sunrise.
Yeah.
Lapis said, her eyes and face reflecting the intense emotion she felt. They sat there, still, for only a moment longer before Peridot jumped to her feet, placing her hands on her hips. Her demeanor had suddenly shifted to her usual spastic eccentricism.
Well, it's just about time to get the day started. Come on, Lapis.
Peridot exclaimed boisterously, jumping down from the tractor. Lapis sat there for a moment longer, reveling in the scenery and the emotions that had just washed over her, taking her time to mentally and emotionally reground herself. She breathed in and gently floated down from the height of the tractor, her bare feet kissing the soft grass. Peridot was a good distance ahead of Lapis as she called out for her to hurry. Lapis produced her wings of water and flew off to her little green partner. With a grunt, Peridot set down a sack of manure. She was winded from the exertion, the bag standing taller than she did. Lapis quietly worked with the soil, with her back to her friend. Peridot wanted her attention, so she grunted again, more exaggerately. Her smile faded as Lapis completely ignored her.
God, why does earth fertilizer have to smell so bad?
Peridot exclaimed, chuckling to herself. Her chuckling dissipated with her smile, as she still received no reaction from Lapis. She sighed, loudly and exacerbatedly, and kicked the manure bag. When she did this, a good amount escaped from the top and landed on her foot and leg. She yelped and shook her leg about violently, and began to run around in circles, shouting.
Ew, gross!
Peridot shouted as she ran about, before catching her foot on a stone and swiftly face-planting.
Ow.
Was all she said, muffled with her face in the dirt. Lapis looked up from her work and giggled. Peridot lifted her face from the ground and began to giggle with her. She sat up and approached Lapis on all fours.
This is nice,
Peridot said with a sigh.
Just you, me, our plants, the earth.
Lapis smiled, looking at Peridot. She felt the emotions of the morning sunrise swell in her. But just as soon as she was lifted to Cloud 9, she was quickly pulled down to earth, to the dirt in which she was suddenly confused.
What the?
Lapis said under her breath as she examined the ground. There appeared to be what looked like an ordinary kitchen sponge, yellow and holy, out in their field.
Peridot, do you know what this is doing here?
No, I don't.
Peridot replied, her brow furrowing as she bent down to look.
Don't touch it. It looks gross.
It looks like a sponge from a kitchen.
We don't have a kitchen.
Lapis rolled her eyes and discarded the anomaly.
Weird.
She said.
But I guess Earth is still full of surprises.
Peridot nodded with a smile.
You got that right. Now help me lay down this earth fertilizer.
The cow poop?
Lapis smiled and giggled. Peridot cringed but forced a smile, and the two got the work. Lapis was lounging up in the pickup truck bed when Peridot approached, covered in dirt.
Hey, Lapis. Enjoying a break?
Lapis didn't respond, her demeanor more aloof than usual. Peridot, feeling silly and in need of attention, began poking Lapis.
Poke, 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 poke.
Peridot went on, smiling wildly. As she did this, Lapis's brow furrowed and she gritted her teeth.
Would you quit it?
She yelled. Peridot quickly jutted back in shock. She held there for a moment before leaning in and assuming a concerned look.
Are you okay?
Peridot touched a hand to Lapis's shoulder.
No? Yeah. No. No.
Lapis put a hand to her face.
I feel sick.
Peridot was taken aback, completely perplexed by the reply.
Gems don't get sick. Unless...
Peridot's eyes went wide and she gasped loudly.
Corruption! You're not corrupting, are you, Lapis?
Peridot frankly began checking Lapis over when she pushed her away.
No. I just feel funny. I can't explain it.
Lapis rested her face in her hands and pulled her knees close. Peridot wore puppy dog eyes as she watched her. She rested a hand on Lapis's back, rubbing it gently. Lapis let out a groan, and Peridot tried her best to comfort her.
Would Camp Pining Hearts make you feel any better?
Maybe.
Peridot crawled over to the television and inserted the VHS tape. The television was flooded with static until the program broke through. Peridot sat back, leaning up against Lapis. This was weird, and Peridot was a little unnerved, but she was determined to be there for her Lapis. The late afternoon was slow at the beach house. Steven and Amethyst were slouched on their couch, enjoying the television. Everything was still. In this moment, the thought of urgency granted to anything seemed unthinkable. As Steven took a sip of his pop, a banging reverberated from the front door. Amethyst groaned, and Steven slowly rose and approached the door. To his surprise, he opened the door to find a very worried Peridot, accompanied by a sickly-looking Lapis.
Greetings, Steven. We need your help. We don't know what to do.
Peridot exclaimed to Steven as she began to hyperventilate. Upon hearing the commotion, Garnet approached from behind Steven. "What's going on?" she asked, coolly and matter-of-factly. Steven Garnet made way as Peridot led Lapis into the home. She laid Lapis down on the couch and began to explain.
I don't know what's happening. Gems aren't supposed to get sick, but Lapis is really sick. Her temperature is far beyond a typical range, and she's sweating profusely. Oh, God.
Peridot began shaking and breathing heavily. Steven tried to calm Peridot down as she fretted, while Garnet observed Lapis.
My back.
Lapis weakly moaned in pain. Garnet gently rolled Lapis onto her side and examined her back. She had lumps all over, from her shoulder blades down to her lower back. The lumps had a greener hue, sticking out against Lapis's blue skin. Garnet paused and thought. Well, it's definitely not corruption, but it is really strange. Lapis should stay here until she recovers. Traveling in this state isn't safe. Peridot, keep an eye on her to see if her condition worsens. Steven, help them as needed. With that, Garnet left, Amethyst leaving too. Steven put a hand on Peridot. Hey, it's gonna be alright.
Easy for you to say, you clod. Can't you see she's suffering?
With this, Lapis groaned in pain. Steven started again. Peridot, I understand you're scared, but lashing out isn't gonna help her. I'm here to help you. Peridot groaned inside. She looked at Steven and knew he was right. She began to stammer out a reply, but read on Steven's face that words wouldn't be necessary. Steven gave her a reassuring smile, and she returned it. Peridot was sitting by Lapis's side. Lapis snored softly, and Peridot ran her fingers through her hair.
I'm SpongeBob.
Peridot nearly jumped out of her skin when she heard the strange voice.
Who said that?
Peridot looked around, startled, scanning the room for the source of the voice. She was met with disgust and fear when her attention was drawn to Lapis's back.
I'm SpongeBob,
Said the little yellow face embedded in Lapis's skin. Peridot began to scream, pulling back and falling off the couch. She laid there, hyperventilating on the floor as Steven rushed in. Peridot, what's going on? Steven asked, worriedly. Peridot, unable to summon words, pointed to Lapis up on the couch. Steven approached hesitantly.
I'm SpongeBob.
Steven let out a yelp, taking a hesitant step back. Steven approached again to take a closer look. Towards the center of Lapis's back, just below her gem, a yellow, holy, almost sponge-like square protruded, as if bursting from her skin. The square sponge had a face, with blue eyes, a long nose, and buck teeth. Steven had never seen anything like it before. He surveyed the rest of her back and saw the many lumps. As the lumps grew in size, they grew green and eventually yellow, becoming square as they breached the surface. Steven began to sweat as he watched them breach. As they did so, the many sores began to call out.
I'm SpongeBob. I'm SpongeBob. I'm SpongeBob. I'm SpongeBob. I'm SpongeBob.
That's really weird, Steven exclaimed, stepping away.
What's happening? What are we gonna do?
Peridot cried out, turning to Steven. Steven saw the worry, the sorrow, and the terror that painted her face. Steven thought hard, scraping the barrel of his mind for a possible solution, when he had an epiphany. That's it! Buddy's journal! He chronicled all the weird stuff about this town. I've looked to him for answers before. I'll go and fetch it. You two hold tight. With that, Steven escaped into the depths of the house. Peridot sat there for a moment, but fear once again overtook her as the creatures resumed calling out. She sat there, visibly fighting with herself, before fear for her friend overcame fear for herself, and she approached Lapis. As Peridot hesitantly surveyed Lapis's back, Lapis began to stir.
What's going on?
Lapis mumbled as she attempted to rise.
No, stay still.
Peridot blurted out, putting her hands on Lapis's shoulders. As this played out, Steven rushed in, carrying a book. Alright guys, listen, I know what this is. Peridot and Lapis attentively listened. They're SpongeBobs. They're earth creatures from Bikini Bottom, just off the coast, which must have washed onto shore. Lapis, you're host to a SpongeBob infestation. As Steven explained this, Peridot listened pensively, while Lapis's eyes grew in fear.
What? An infestation?
Lapis placed a hand to her forehead, eyes darting wildly.
Well, we'll just have to kick them out.
Peridot said resolutely, standing up and smacking her fist into her palm.
I'm SpongeBob. Would you shut up, you clod? I'm SpongeBob.
Peridot scowled, gritting her teeth, and growled in frustration.
Just get them out, alright?
Lapis exacerbatedly cried out. Peridot softened and put a hand on Lapis.
I need you to get some supplies.
She turned her head to Steven.
I have a procedure to perform.
Peridot slipped on her second latex glove, stretching it and letting it snap. She retrieved the tweezers with a look of determination. She breathed in and approached Lapis.
Alright, Lapis, you ready?
Ugh, it's so uncomfortable. Just get it over with.
Peridot smiled. Knowing what she was up against, she was ready. She began to explain the procedure to Lapis as she performed it.
Alright, I'm gonna apply this antiseptic solution before I start. It's gonna sting just a little.
Peridot felt a pull on her heartstrings as Lapis grunted in pain. Peridot used the tweezers to begin removing the SpongeBobs one by one.
I'm SpongeBob.
She held the SpongeBob in her tweezers and brung it to her face.
Listen up, Sponge Clod. You need to leave Lapis alone. She's not your home.
She set the SpongeBob aside and continued with her work.
Ow, that hurts!
Lapis winced in pain. Peridot's eyes grew as she struggled to hold in her emotions.
Sorry, Lapis. I'm being as gentle as I can. These SpongeBobs are really embedded in your skin.
She continued to work, Lapis wincing in pain as the deeper SpongeBobs were removed. Peridot cringed and winced along with her. She felt the same pain she was feeling. At that moment, she felt close to her. After a while, Peridot sat back and wiped sweat from her brow. She retrieved a cleansing solution and gently applied it.
Is it over?
Lapis moaned, not lifting her head. Peridot stood up triumphantly.
Yep. Thanks to my skills, I was able to remove all the SpongeBobs. Your back will need to heal, though. It might take a few days or so.
Stephen then stepped up. Here! Stephen licked his palm and pressed it down on Lapis's back. She began to glow as the holes left in her back began to fill with skin. In mere moments, her back was smooth and healed.
Wow, thanks, Steven. I feel great.
Lapis stood up jubilantly, rubbing a hand behind her, feeling her restored smooth skin. Peridot's face sunk.
Well, Steven shouldn't get all the credit. I mean, who was there with the tweezers?
Peridot swung her arms. Lapis blushed and began to giggle. Peridot's smile returned and she joined her. They shared a laugh, and Stephen joined in, putting a hand on each of their shoulders. Their laughter quickly dissipated and Lapis cleared her throat.
We should be off then.
Lapis said as she approached the door.
Thank you, Steven.
No prob, Bob.
It's Lapis.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
The day's warmth began to slip into the chill of the evening as the sun began to approach the land to the west. The cornstalks rustled to the breeze as they did every evening. Lapis sat atop the tractor, waiting for her friend. She took a moment to reflect on the day that she had just gone through. She felt the rush of emotion she knew from this morning swell within her as she took in the setting sun. She began to grow antsy, waiting for Peridot.
Peridot, come on!
She shouted behind her. The cornstalks rustled as Peridot made a path through them and emerged.
Just checking on the earth corn. Soon they'll be ready to do our bidding.
Peridot gave a maniacal laugh. Lapis laughed and shook her head.
Get up here, silly.
Peridot ran over and grunted as she climbed, crawling on all fours towards Lapis and sitting next to her. They sat there for a long while, taking in the scene. They watched as the radius of light around the sun faded into a bright crimson, before fading into a deep violet. Their eyes were wide with wonder, mouths agape. All was still and quiet when Peridot began to speak.
Someday, huh?
You could say that again.
Peridot paused, poised in thought. She carefully formulated her next words.
You know, it was awful watching you go through that. It really was. But, in a way, I almost felt closer to you because of it. I felt your pain. Watching you hurt, it hurt me.
As she said this, she looked to her side, away from Lapis. She then turned towards her, face blushing a deep green. She smiled sheepishly, a few tears beginning to well in the corners of her eyes. She began again, weakly.
I don't know if that makes sense, but...
She trailed off, expectant of a response. Lapis held in a response for a moment. She looked at Peridot and felt the same tears begin to well up in her. Her face turned a deep blue and she giggled.
I feel the same way. The sunrise this morning, I felt a piece of you in me. You shared that piece with me, and I felt a part of you as you felt a part of me.
Lapis then began to laugh as tears ran down her face. Peridot's tears flowed on cue. Her lip quivered and she began to cry. Lapis embraced her, as they cried the same tears and felt the same overwhelming adoration for each other. Lapis pulled back and cupped Peridot's face, wiping her tears with her thumbs. They looked into each other, taking in each other's gaze, and as if pulled together by all the forces of the universe they had explored, They leaned in and kissed as the sun set. They were pretty good friends, one could say.